I actually think that, you know, the ethos of our community, the guiding principles of our law are based and built around Christianity. Now, you don't have to be a Christian to recognise there are inherent benefits to that. I support the federal government's chaplaincy program. I think it provides a pastoral care to students, I think, in a consistent manner, and I think it's a really worthy program.
But aren't they told? I was reading about this, and it seemed that they're not supposed to proselytize. So, as someone was saying, it's like paying $250 million to invite clowns into the schools and tell them not to be funny. I mean,
Corey, a quick response to that, and then I'll go to the other panellists.
Yeah, it's not about proselytising, but it's about informing students and providing pastoral care within, I think, a moral framework that's consistent with our laws and expectations.
Why did you take away the option for public schools to have a secular welfare worker for their students?
Well, this is a federal government program, and it was initiated by Mr Howard, and it was always about school chaplains. The secular option, if you will, the social workers and things, have always been funded in schools by state government programs. If the feds are going to fund it, I think they should be able to determine what they want there.
OK, Catherine King.
Well, Martin, thank you very much for your question and also sharing your personal story. I mean, this shows the priorities of the government. Right at its heart, it's cutting funding to some of the most vulnerable students, you know, schools across the country. It is cutting funding. It's cutting funding from health. At the same time, taking qualified social workers, qualified psychologists out of our schools, and it just shows where the government's priorities are, and we think they're wrong. We deliberately changed the school chaplaincy program to include and allow schools to make decisions about who they wanted in their schools. I'm deeply concerned about social workers now, as a former social worker myself, actually, you know, now not being in schools and actually being replaced by chaplains. I think there's something quite disturbing.
Catherine, I might interrupt you there because we actually have someone in that position who's asked a question tonight. It's Richard Collis.
2 years ago, I started studying youth work just down the road at Ultimo TAFE, and I firmly believe that the permanent funded staff who are in schools, who are responsible for the welfare of the young people, should be professionally trained youth and social workers who don't represent a particular faith through that, because we come from a youth-focused approach, not from a faith-based approach. What do you guys think?
Well, you can continue, Catherine. I'll hear from the rest of the panel straight away.
Richard's absolutely right. I think the importance of the youth workers who've been in schools, of social workers, not just providing pastoral care, but actually providing a professional counselling service has been really important. And again, I think the government's priorities on this are absolutely wrong. To cut funding that would have provided disability support for someone like your daughter in schools, at the same time as, you know, doing this just seems to me to be completely the wrong way about it.
Rowan Dean.
Yeah, well, actually, they're both right. And the point is that Labor promised all sorts of spending into the future, and Corey is absolutely right. When we keep saying cuts, we're not talking about cuts. We're talking about removing part of the money that wasn't there in the first place. So that's that. But the second more important thing, and Catherine is right, and both Richard and Martin, and I feel for your daughter there. The point is that schools should be able to determine for themselves whether they want a chaplain, whether they want a social worker, whether they want a physicist, whether they want Tommy Dean as a comedian. It doesn't really matter. The school should have the power to decide that for themselves. It shouldn't be something.
So do you think it's wrong that the government has specifically allocated this money to school chaplains?
Yes, I do. And I think in terms of priorities, we have far greater priorities, and I'm sure we'll be discussing some of them later. But to me, that's a small issue. The priorities that we need, the reason we need to get this budget back under control is so that we can be honest about our priorities and say what the important ones are.
Would you agree that $250 million, $245 million is not a small amount?
No, it's not a small amount of money. Okay, no. And personally, I wouldn't
for
put
what?
it there.
I mean, I heard pastoral care. What? I don't understand what this pastoral care is. These people aren't trained. They're not like social workers. They're not trained to work with children. And certain people, I think, who might provide pastoral care, you'd want to actually keep away from children. You know, so I just don't understand what is pastoral care if it isn't proselytizing. I just don't understand. It has no meaning whatsoever to me.